Hi Booktube, Aaron here. Hope you're doing very well. Today I have yet another book haul for you with a pile of books that have, it has accrued over the last couple of weeks or so. I'm hoping I'll be able to show some restraint in the near future, since it's getting to a point where I'm beginning to have to think about where I put them, maybe start thinking about rearranging books to fit them all in. But we're not quite there yet, but we'll see how it goes. The first couple of books here, um, they turned up. I found them not too long after the last book haul video that I made, and they were in a supermarket, and sometimes on the way out. At least here we have like charity sort of book stalls. So there'll just be a bookshelf of secondhand books and a little donation pot. Um, and I love sort of rooting through those, and there's always quite a lot of variety there. And I found a couple, and this first one is a book that I'm still feeling a bit intimidated by, but I would really quite like to get to eventually, and that's George Eliot's Middlemarch. I've only read, is it Cousin Jacob, something like that, by George Eliot, which I can't remember much about at all, really. But I would, yeah, I've heard so many people say so many great things about Middlemarch. And what is it about? On here it says it's recognised as a major, well, I suppose as a writer, George Eliot has now been recognised as a major literary figure of the 19th century. Does it say what actually happens in the book? Eliot paints a luminous and spacious landscape of life in a provincial town. With sure and subtle touch, she draws together the links of the rural network. Dorothea, a modern St. Teresa, Dr. Lydgate, the young doctor defeated by self and circumstance. Rosamund, that masterly study in triviality and egoism, and the unprepossessing and doomed banker, Bulstrode. Is it Bulstrode? Let me know if you've read it or if you know. Indeed, in her analysis of human nature, George Eliot achieved what Dr. Leavis has called a Tolstoyan depth and reality. And I suppose that depth of character is one thing I really love Tolstoy for. And so if that comparison has been made, then yeah, hopefully I'll find it in there. And then the next thing I found is a collection of essays, classics and commercials by Edmund Wilson. So this is stuff from a literary chronicle. Well, it just says a literary chronicle of the 1940s, and it's got all sorts of just amazing stuff in here. On the first page, so for like the first 160 pages, I barely recognised any of the any of the writers that he's writing about. But there's stuff on Dorothy Parker, on Sartre and Kafka, on Jane Austen, on Gogol, on Dr. Johnson, just sort of all sorts of stuff. And I suppose, well, most of it is going to be quite literary, but there may be some sort of cultural stuff from the period. I think Edmund Wilson, I'm just going to double check by looking at my bookcase. Yes, he's sort of mainly known as a sort of biographer. I'm just making sure I'm not getting my names muddled up. But yeah, this is just essays and occasional prose. And this is from 1950. Oh, and it's got there's the Archibald MacLeish there. Yeah, okay, so just actually start off with an essay on Archibald MacLeish, so at least one writer on that first page of the table of contents that I recognised. And then next up, a couple of books that I bought because they're the second half of a series that I've been enjoying, and that's the Alexandria Quartet by Lawrence Durrell. I've now read the first two, Justine, and Balthazar. And then the next book, the third book, is Mount Olive, and then the fourth is Clear. And so the first book, Justine, is a writer who's retreated to this island in the Mediterranean with a young child that he's kind of inherited, I suppose. And she's not his child, but he's looking after her, and he's retreated there to kind of make sense of his life and write a novel inspired by the relationships, friendships, the affairs, and just sort of everything, all the people he knew in Alexandria in the sort of 1930s leading up to the Second World War. And it's so lush, and it's but really odd, and you are constantly trying to work out what's going on because he's writing everything in the order of significance that they happen to him, and so it's not chronological and it's a bit all over the place. The second book follows in, it feels just about as unstructured. The kind of setup of the second book is that a friend has come along, has read his manuscript, and has then annotated it, and his annotations are adding depth and perspective to the story, and sort of showing the writer that actually he didn't see the full picture. And so we have these digressions into there's a kind of backstory of some other characters, and it sort of awakens other memories as well in the writer as well. And it's just really really fascinating. And then I get the impression that the third book, Mount Olive, is yet another perspective on the same period. But here we're more or less leaving many of the main characters that we've seen so far. So that's the impression that I get with what goes on in Mount Olive. And then it's only in the last book, Clear, that I think we move back to the main character, and he decides to go back to Alexandria, and that the story kind of moves on. Although if the other books are anything to go by, I'm sure there'll be a lot of navel gazing and reinterpretation of the past. And then when I picked them up, I just got them straight from Faber and Faber's website, since they published them, and I like the editions they have of them with the handprint. And so since I was on there, and since I saw that this book was on offer there, I kind of buckled and picked up the complete poems of Emily Dickinson. Before I only had a sort of slim selection of her poetry, and so this is everything that she wrote, and I've already started reading it. I was planning this month to read a selection of poems by Elizabeth Jennings, but once I got this, that went out the window, and I just went straight into these poems, and I'm just really loving it. One of those poets where, for me, it really feels like just coming home. There's a sense of, I think, this book being a kind of a page turner, because I just want to keep going, and I just want to keep reading more poems. It helps that many of them are quite short as well, but it's also doing the thing that you kind of want when you're reading poetry, which is that it kind of slows you down as well, and that you stop every now and then, and just the very curious way that she puts things constantly has me rethinking what she might actually mean, what she's actually trying to say, and it's constantly just showing you new ways to see things. And then there's 4 more books I just picked up, and in some ways wasn't really expecting them, but I just saw them secondhand and picked them up. First is Poems and Prose by Gerard Manley Hopkins. I have a slim selection of some of his poetry and some of his prose in a little black Penguin Classics that I think is taken from this edition. And so this has quite a lot from his journals, but also a much more substantial sampling of his poetry as well. And I think that's the thing I found with the little black penguin was that because it's so short and because it's sampling both his poetry and his prose, once I got to the end of the poetry section, it only really whetted my appetite, and I just needed more. So I'm glad I've got that now. And then I picked this up. This is George and Whedon Grossmith's The Diary of Nobody. It's got illustrations. So I think it was maybe written by, I'm not sure, but certainly Whedon Grossmith drew these illustrations, and they're all the way through. It seems to be a satire about late Victorian sort of middle class life. It says on here, it's a book which also sends up late Victorian crazes for spiritualism and bicycling, which I'm looking forward to. I think this was in kind of the forefront of my mind because Jason from the channel of The Disappointed Man, he brought it up recently. I think either he hauled it recently or it may have been I think it was in a library tour, and seeing him talking about it sort of reminded me that it was something that I'd be interested in. And two more to go. This is one that strictly I don't need. I already have this in an anthology, but I saw it and I just got really excited. It's Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe in a Norton Critical edition, and the actual play itself there's actually an introduction. So the actual play itself is that. We've got an introduction and sort of things like that there, and then we've got sources and context. So just a plethora of critical and academic writing on Dr. Faustus. I think on the myth itself, on the text, on how it's been performed, and just all sorts of stuff. And so I was just really excited to see this, and at some point I'll just dive in and just live in the world of this play for as long as I want. And it's one of my all-time favourite plays. So I was just very excited to see it, I suppose. And then the last one is, I suppose it's a habit that I've seemed to have taken on this year, which is to slowly collect books by Thomas Mann, particularly translated by Jonathan E. Woods. And here I've got Joseph and His Brothers. So I've got most of the big books now. I've got Dr. Faustus, Buddenbrooks, Magic Mountain, and got some short stories as well. So I think I've got more than enough Thomas Mann to keep me busy for the time being. But that's it. That's the whole book haul. So I'll go through in review. So we've got Joseph and His Brothers by Thomas Mann in the translation that I seem to enjoy for Thomas Mann. Then we've got Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. We've got Diary of a Nobody by George and Whedon Grossmith. We've got Gerard Manley Hopkins, Poems and Prose. We've got the complete poems of Emily Dickinson. We've got Claire by Lawrence Durrell, and Mount Olive by Lawrence Durrell. we've got Classics and Commercials, A Literary Chronicle of the 1940s by Edmund Wilson. And then to finish off, we've got Middlemarch by George Eliot. So that's it. Potentially the last book haul for a while, or at least the biggest book haul for a while. Maybe the next one I do will be a little more humble. And I'll have to do some adding up. I'm almost certain I've probably bought more books than I've read so far this year. So I'll need to take a breather and catch up. But yeah, I'm quite pleased, and I'm just excited with the books that are waiting for me. And so whether this is it for a while or whether I give in to this particular vice, we'll see. But I hope there was at least something interesting in there for you. So for now, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.